Antoine Winfield Jr. gets a mega deal in Tampa. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Monday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Jason Licht loves being the underdog, and Jalen McMillan wants to fire a lot of cannons this year. That is all coming up a little bit later, but let's start with the obvious breaking news that happened right before I went live, and that is that the Buccaneers and Antoine Winfield Jr. have agreed to a 4-year deal. I am going to dive into that a little bit more, but I wanted to start with the direction I was going to take this show in before the news broke, and that was with Jason Licht's appearance on the Pat McAfee show. Now, I know I told you guys I was going to have my Chris Braswell breakdown coming today, but I felt it was important to talk about some of the things that Jason Licht spoke about before I got to that, since they happened since my last episode was recorded. And I did spend a lot of time over the weekend watching Alabama games. I have plenty to say on Braswell, but Jason Licht was a guest on the Pat McAfee show last week and had a few things to say that I found interesting. And if you haven't heard it, check it out for sure. Jason is great. And of course, McAfee and his crew were on point. And I have to say the best part was when Jason Licht basically reminded McAfee that he could have been part of the boat parade. And when the realization hit McAfee, the look on his face was priceless. But one of the things that was brought up was the status of Antoine Winfield Jr. and his contract. Winfield, of course, was still on the franchise tag at the time, but Tone Diggs asked Jason about the contract talks and how those were progressing. And Jason said, quote, "We're still working on it right now. Crossing our fingers. I think there's some positive movement. I don't know when that's going to come. You know, it takes two sides, and they're being totally fair, and we think we're being fair. So he wants to be here. We want him. Those things usually work out, and I'm fairly positive about where things are going with that. He's a hell of a player. I think he keeps on this trajectory. He's also somebody that can be mentioned Hall of Fame worthy. I'm not afraid to admit that. I don't think it's going to hurt negotiations. I've been upfront with them the whole time. He's the best safety in the league. He should be paid like it," end quote. Jason went on to say that the deadline to get a deal done, because he was on the franchise tag, was July 14th, but he and his family were going to be on vacation at that point in time, and he wanted to have the deal done before then. Well, guess what? The deal is done. Right after I got the show prepped and ready to discuss a potential deal, the deal gets done. Antoine Winfield Jr. is not just the highest paid safety in the league. He's the highest paid defensive back, which is the first time that has ever happened in the history of the NFL, that the highest paid defensive back is a safety. Winfield's deal is 4 years, $84.1 million with $45 million guaranteed. That is the most guaranteed money ever given to a safety, and it comes in at $0.025 million or $25,000 more than Jair Alexander to make him the top paid defensive back at $21.025 million on average per year. Alexander is at $21 million, followed by Denzel Ward at $20.1 million, Jalen Ramsey at $20 million, and Marlon Humphrey at $19.5 million as your top 5 highest paid defensive backs in all of football. Jason Licht knew how important Antoine was and is, and he knew he had to pay for that. Meanwhile, he's probably still working on Tristan Wirfs' extension, which I have no doubt gets done before the season starts, but there was a deadline for Antoine's deal to get done. So that took priority over Tristan Wirfs. Just like Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield took priority before free agency began, Antoine took priority over Tristan to get this extension hammered out so that he wasn't playing on the franchise tag. He is coming off one of the most historic seasons ever by a safety, and he's gotten better every year that he's been in the NFL. This is an all-pro, Pro Bowl player that is only going to continue on an upward trajectory. And just for reference, Antoine Winfield Jr. in the 2023 season had 120 tackles, 6 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, and 3 interceptions. The other players in NFL history to accomplish that all in one season, none. 0. Antoine Winfield Jr. is the only player to ever do that. Now you add on Jordan Whitehead to help out and allow Antoine even more flexibility to be all over the field and create even more plays. It's probably a good thing that Jason got this deal done now, because if he had played on the franchise tag and had another season like that, it was going to cost even more money. We could be looking at this contract 1 year from now and saying, wow, this is an absolute steal for this guy. But going back to Jason's appearance on the Pat McAfee show, I have to say, I thought it was fantastic that Jason was a little open and a little transparent when it came to Winfield. He could have done the whole, oh yeah, that's something that we'd really like to get done, and pretty much just left it at that. And instead, he talked about how negotiations are still ongoing, talked about how Antoine deserved to be the highest paid safety in the league because he is the best safety in the league, and he pulled the curtain back just a tad. Well, not only did he feel that Antoine Winfield Jr. was the best safety in the NFL, he obviously thought that Antoine was the best defensive back in the NFL. What an absolutely incredible deal for Antoine Winfield Jr. We don't have the full structure yet. Once that comes out, obviously I will talk about it. It usually takes a day or two for us to be able to see how the structure works. But Greg Allman pointed out that a lot of times when a guy is on a franchise tag, when they get this extension done, it's added on. This deal is taking the place of the franchise tag. So this contract runs from the 2024 season through the 2027 season, giving Antoine an opportunity, as I mentioned a couple of times, talking about what I thought a contract would look like. That means that Antoine is going to be able to hit it big in free agency or get another big contract done again before his age 30 season. I want to jump into the chat real quick. I know a lot of you are really excited about this. John Tucker says, about time this deal got done. Fausto CFS says, best safety in the NFL. Insider David waving and throwing up fire emojis. Paul, a.k.a. Florida Dream House, huge breaking news. Bucs going to be dangerous in 2024. David also says, can't believe Pat was almost the punter in the Super Bowl season. Not just the punter, but he would have been the punter and the kicker that week because both Suckup and Pinion were in the COVID protocol. So that's why Bruce reached out to Pat. He was going to pull double duty. Let's see. Narav says, if Jalen works out, this Antoine Winfield Jr. deal might spell goodbye for Godwin. I've talked about Godwin's future a couple of times. I'm sure it's going to be an ongoing theme. I do think this is his last year in Tampa, but I'm not going to rule it out completely. It's just really tough for teams to have multiple $20+ million a year wide receivers. Will in the chat says straight cash, homie. And then Jordan in the chat says literally the best safety in the NFL. Well, Antoine Winfield Jr. wasn't the only thing that Jason Licht was talking about on the Pat McAfee show. He also talked about being in quote unquote witness protection. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Every day, make sure you're coming back tomorrow. I will finally have my Chris Braswell breakdown and going to do a little bit of a schedule preview. The schedule drops this week, so make sure you're going to want to tune in to that. In the meantime, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Last week, I mentioned some quarterback power rankings and how, once again, Baker Mayfield is being overlooked and disrespected. My dog is making all kinds of noise right now. Well, I am not the only one to notice this. And McAfee asked Jason Licht about being overlooked, saying you guys have the same ownership group, the same GM, same head coach, same quarterback, same all-pro weapon at receiver, majority of the defense back, and not favored in the NFC South to win going into the season. Well, Jason Licht responded with, quote, "Yeah, we're kind of used to it. I sometimes feel like down here in Tampa, we're in witness protection. I don't want to say we get pooped on." He didn't say pooped, but I can't say what he said. But there's just kind of a lack of respect. You can go on like Levante David. I think he's a Hall of Fame type player. He doesn't get enough credit as he should. Mike Evans just recently started getting talked about as a future Hall of Famer. So we're used to it, but you kind of use it as ammo. It's embedded in the DNA of this team. It's like we have a quarterback right now that's got a huge chip on his shoulder and always will, and uses it in his play style, and the whole team takes after it, end quote. Jason will go on to talk about how he gets excited when someone insults them or counts them out or writes them off. And now he uses things like that to put up in his office and quote unquote keep receipts. You guys all saw the video where he talked to the Sports Illustrated writer who said they were only going to win 3 games and told him that he had that article hanging up in his office. Now, even his family will send him links to things along those same lines. I cannot begin to tell you how much I love this. And you can rewind the tape about 14 months ago when I first started talking about how Baker would be a good fit in Tampa, not just because I thought he got a raw deal in Carolina or in Cleveland, but because of his attitude. Tom Brady brought an attitude to this team of do the job, do it right, don't screw it up, and I'll show you how to win. And that's exactly what he did. But then he retired, and it went right back to, oh, well, Tom's gone. Tampa's going to suck. Tampa is going to be one of the worst teams in the league. Tampa is going to draft Caleb Williams with the number 1 pick, and they're only going to win 3 games, and they're worse than the Panthers, and on and on and on. The attitude that Baker Mayfield has, that chip on his shoulder, it could not have been any more perfect for this team in that moment. That, hey, we have a talented roster here. We still have elite players. We still have Pro Bowlers and all pros and some of the best players in the NFL at their position. Tom wasn't the whole team, but now the whole team is being counted out because one guy left. In walks Baker with that massive chip on his shoulder from being booted from Cleveland and then the rest of the train wreck that was his 2022. And his chip matched the chip on the shoulder of the rest of the Buccaneers franchise, from the roster to the coaching staff to the front office to Jason Licht himself, because the outsiders looking in thought it was all about Tom. Now it's happening again. And I mean, you take a look at FanDuel's odds for the Bucs to win the Super Bowl. It's at plus 5,500. And I'm not sitting here pounding the table saying the Buccaneers are going to win the Super Bowl this year. That's not what I'm saying. But their odds are at plus 5,500 behind the Steelers, behind the Chargers, behind the Falcons, behind the Bears. The Bears, with a rookie quarterback who I still don't think is going to pan out in the NFL. That is to be determined. But you're giving the Bears better Super Bowl odds than a team that has been to the playoffs 4 consecutive seasons, has won their division 3 consecutive seasons, should have had the NFL's comeback player of the year, and how it went to Joe Flacco is beyond me. When he did okay for like a month and still turned the ball over more than Baker Mayfield did in the entire season. But not only are their Super Bowl odds that long and behind teams like the Bears and the Chargers and the Steelers, they're at plus 290 to win the NFC South. That's behind the Falcons, who are at plus 120, and just ahead of the New Orleans Saints, who are at plus 340. I know there's excitement for Atlanta fans, and the media are hyping up Atlanta because you get Raheem Morris getting his second opportunity to be an NFL head coach, which in my personal opinion was long overdue. I think Raheem Morris is going to be a good football coach, but you're putting all that trust in Kirk Cousins, who has accomplished exactly what? Somebody tell me, besides the you like that game, what has Kirk Cousins accomplished that Baker Mayfield hasn't? Please, someone fill me in, because I'm obviously missing something. The Bucs continue to use this kind of stuff as fuel and as motivation and as bulletin board material. And I have to say, Jason Licht, if I ever said anything on this show that you used as bulletin board material, I want to say, first and foremost, I'm sorry. I come on here, I give my honest opinion, my honest assessment, but also you're welcome, because you guys use that bulletin board material to fuel a lot of things. But no, I thought Jason Licht's appearance on the McAfee show was great. And I love to hear again how candid and honest he is about situations like that. I'm going to jump into the chat one more time before we get to the break. I just saw Nathan says Chicago is a larger media market. Follow the money. I get that they're a bigger media market, but stop lying to people. Like, I get why Dallas gets hyped up every year. They have the biggest following of any team in the NFL, and they're going to get hyped every single year. I get it. But the Giants are a bigger media market than Tampa. The Jets are a bigger media market because it's the same market, but no one's talking about how great the Jets are going to be because Daniel Jones is trash. You don't know what you're going to get out of Caleb Williams, and the Bears overall kind of stunk pretty bad last year. Now they've made big improvements. Their wide receiving core is light years ahead of what it was last year, but I still don't buy into Caleb Williams. I don't think he has the mental toughness to be a quarterback in the NFL. It's the same knock that I had on Michael Penix. And honestly, if both of them get their heads in the right space, I think Michael Penix is the better quarterback. You can't teach that kind of arm strength and accuracy that Penix has, but it's all about what's upstairs. And I don't think Caleb Williams has the mental toughness to be a quarterback in the National Football League. I just don't. And if he proves me wrong, I'll eat my crow, just like I did with CJ Stroud. Andrew in the chat says it's literally shocking the disrespect Tampa Bay's market gets. I mean, it happens year after year after year. And I'm glad Jason Licht kind of shined a light on it and said, you know what? We see this. We hear this. I have people sending me links to this, and we talk about it in the building. It's not going unnoticed. Jordan in the chat says, do you feel like if Godwin balls out this year, they would still let him go due to money? Probably. I think it's all going to boil down to money with Chris Godwin. And real quick, one last one. Nirav in the chat says winning actual games is better than potentially winning games. Nailed it. 100% nailed it. But talking about expectations and what things could be, Jalen McMillan has some high expectations for next season. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, parlays, and much more. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs and slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. The Boston Celtics are still the favorites to win the NBA Finals at minus 140, followed by the defending champion Denver Nuggets at plus 360, and the team that they are facing off against right now, the Minnesota Timberwolves, third in line at plus 800. And what a series that has been. In the race for Lord Stanley's Cup, the greatest trophy in all of sports, the Florida Panthers are the favorites at plus 250, followed by the Dallas Stars at plus 310, and then the red-hot New York Rangers, who have not lost in the postseason yet, they're in third at plus 380. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Wrapping things up here on a Monday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. We've talked about Antoine Winfield Jr., Antoine Winfield Jr. becoming the highest paid defensive back in the National Football League. We've talked about Jason Licht putting a spotlight on the disrespect. And now I have to say that I am excited about Jalen McMillan, y'all. And I'll have my film study on him coming up probably next week, maybe the beginning of the week after. But Jalen had the chance to speak with the media, and he talked about Mike Evans reaching out and basically telling him, hey, anything that you need, just ask. So McMillan mentioned that he didn't have the playbook yet, and boom, Mike Evans sent it over immediately. So first and foremost, I love the camaraderie there already. There's no, oh, he's going to cut into my reps or anything like that. He is part of the room. He is there to help Mike, to help Chris, to help Baker, and help this offense succeed. But McMillan talked about his experience with the Washington Huskies, how he kept trying to rush back from injury, and his fellow receivers told him, take your time and fully recover, because he kept trying to come back too soon and he kept re-aggravating that injury. And they had, they told him, we have things covered for now. We need you down the stretch. Get fully healthy. McMillan also talked about the standard to which the receivers at Washington held themselves to. And he said, quote, at Washington, the whole standard in the room was to make the stadium go boom. People come into the stadium with expectations, and you're supposed to meet them and let their emotions soar. Every time we focused on that, whether it's me or my teammate, that's just the goal. That's one of my goals, to change the whole dynamic of the stadium, end quote. I love that. out of this rookie wide receiver. This guy wants to put on a show, and there is no stadium in the NFL that can literally go boom the way Ray J does. However, my biggest takeaway from this is the maturity and recognition of McMillan talking about the standard and expectations. I can't think of a wide receiver room in the NFL that would be more in line with that mentality than Tampa's. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin hold themselves to an incredibly high standard, both on the field and off the field. They show up, they grind year round to be one of, if not the best wide receiver duo in the league. You have a guy that is going to be in the Hall of Fame. You have Chris Godwin, who has had his ups and downs, but those downs sure aren't very shallow. I mean, he still puts up some impressive numbers even on a down year. And that's why, I talked about Tom Brady in the last segment. That's why Tom Brady wanted to come to Tampa, is because of Mike, because of Chris, because of their understanding of the game, how important it is to them, how hard they work, and how much they dedicate themselves to their craft. But beyond that, they're involved in the community with their charities. They are ingrained in Tampa with their work within the community, with their foundations. And it's phenomenal to see. And you have never once heard about them being difficult, about causing issues, about being egomaniacs or divas or anything like that. Yes, we had that Instagram post from Mariah last year when she was frustrated about what was going on with Chris, but Chris wasn't a distraction. I wouldn't even say that Mariah was a distraction. She was venting, and I thought she had every right to. I came on this show and said, thank you, for speaking out. And then all of a sudden, Chris gets more involved and the team starts to go on a winning streak. Those guys are two of the kindest and most genuine players you would ever want to meet, you would ever want to play with, you would ever want to be around. And hearing Jalen McMillan as a rookie, even though he's a little bit older, he's a more, mature person given his age and his experience. But you hear him talk about that kind of atmosphere in Washington, and it just makes me think that he's that much better of a draft pick than I already believed. Now, we just have to see it play out on the field on Sundays. But love what I'm hearing and seeing out of Jalen McMillan, and I could not be more excited to dive into some of those games and really watch what he can do. Of course, coming up tomorrow, I will have my Chris Braswell breakdown. I have a notebook of notes about Braswell, really focused in on certain things and was a little curious, and I'll talk about it more tomorrow, about how Pro Football Focus scored some of these games. You guys know that I did that for my Graham Barton breakdown. I did it again for Braswell, and I'll talk more about it tomorrow. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into the chat one more time. Oh my goodness, David Harrison. I love you, David. I miss you, buddy. He says, Antoine Winfield Jr., best young safety in the NFL. Love the deal for both sides. And then he said, how dare you? I'm assuming to something that I said, but I don't know. But David, keeping me honest, since he can't be here in person, buddy, I'm so happy that you're in this chat. We got Fausto in the chat, says, don't want to be the correction guy. Rangers did lose their last game. 7-1 is impressive, though. I apologize. I thought they were 7-0. I apparently missed that last game, but hey, good on Carolina for winning one, because I was kind of hoping that they were going to win that series. I don't think that's happening now, but the Rangers are an absolute wagon right now. One more comment. Nathan Elliott in the chat says, New York is a bigger market, but the media has gone sour on Daniel Jones, and they do not know what to think about Aaron Rodgers. Very true. Also, and David, if you're still in the live chat, you can attest to this. I said when the contract happened that they should not sign Daniel Jones to that big of a deal, because it was Saquon Barkley. It was not Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones was still terrible, but they gave him a ridiculous sum of money anyway. And yeah, you reap what you sow on that one. And honestly, Nathan, I don't know what to make of Aaron Rodgers either at this point in time. We'll see if he bounces back. If he does, the Jets are going to be a formidable team for sure, because they were already a pretty solid roster without Aaron Rodgers. You bring him into the mix and anything can happen. But that MetLife turf, that's a tough one, which makes me shake my head. Why are the Bengals putting in the same turf when you have a quarterback that has a history of knee injuries? I don't know. David did jump back in the chat, said re-signing Daniel Jones was dumb. Absolutely love that. With that, I am going to bid you all a fair adieu. Remember, coming up tomorrow, I will have my Chris Braswell breakdown and going to give some predictions regarding the Buccaneers schedule. That schedule will come out on Wednesday. I will go live Wednesday night to do a schedule reaction episode, probably around 8:30, somewhere between 8:30 and 9, but I will go live Wednesday night. Make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube with the notifications turned on so you know when that happens. In the meantime, check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.